Today we have our new pal Cameron Scott sharing, and Cameron is with Modern Methods. And Modern Methods is the work of producer, instrumentalist, and visual artist Cameron, based in Northern California. Modern Methods is the product of Cameron Scott's 25 years of performance and music production experience. His resume includes multi-instrumentalist, recording engineer, concert producer, promoter, band and tour manager, and wellness advocate. And I'm so grateful that you're here to share about your spiritual journey and your music here in the safe space. So, welcome, Cameron. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I think it's really awesome, kind of the platform you're making here to explore spirituality through not necessarily in the religious and church box. And I've been, looking at what you've been doing, and it's really cool. And so glad that we were able to connect and that I'm here and get to share my story and my music.
Thank you so much for saying that. And on that note, I'm curious because I know that your story doesn't involve Christianity, which you're so blessed for in a way. Have I'm just curious, like, have you ever encountered that world, been invited to churches, been invited to dabble, and what made you not?
Right. Well, my dad is a recovering Catholic. He went to Catholic school
Love
growing
that.
up. So he was like, I'm never putting my kids through that. And yeah, I definitely went to church with some friends growing up. I'd stay over with them, and then Sunday I'd go with them. It never drew me in. Um, the whole church thing never appealed to me. Um, and but as I got older and looked at it more from a philosophy state of mind, because I got introduced to Taoism by my middle sister when I was in my early teens. I think the first she gave me the Way of the Peaceful Warrior and the Tao of Pooh, and I read those, and that really resonated with me. Taoism and some facets of Zen and Buddhism and things like that. Those were the first kind of religious, more philosophies that resonated with me. But I began kind of looking at it more from that a philosophy standpoint rather than a religious standpoint. And I very much so enjoy the teachings of Jesus Christ. But look at him in the same vein as the Buddha or Muhammad or any of the philosophical leaders of that time period, all contributing one aspect to the greater picture. And so I kind of put it into, okay, yeah, here's a philosophy, a way to interact and think about the world. But the religiosity of it never really struck me as something true to myself.
You said your dad's a recovering Catholic, but those ideas were never like instilled in you as a kid?
Um, and if anything, an anti-church was instilled in me. Um, and it honestly didn't even really register into my world until I got to a certain point. I remember I was on the school bus and something was coming up like a baptism or something like that. And I was like, oh, I've never, I just mentioned I wasn't baptized. And they were like, what? You're not baptized? You're going to hell. And I was just like, that's a weird thing to say, which is, of course, not them. It's their parents and the
Totally.
church onto the parents, and just trickles down. They're just repeating what they heard. But that was like the first time it really came into my consciousness that, oh, as it is as a kid, oh, you mean everybody isn't like this?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and so, yeah, it was never, yeah, if anything, an anti, you know, uh, church Christianity thing, which, to some extent, I think is in some realms also just as dogmatic as the church itself, because my parents, now that they're older, are particularly my mom is dealing with the mortality issue. And she is
Mhm.
so a spiritual that when you reach that later point in your life, you have to think about the transition over from this life into the next. And for her, it's a black abyss. And so she has this huge fear. And I try and get her to embrace some spirituality, but she can't untether spirituality and Christianity or religiousness or churches.
Wow.
And so I'm really trying to get her to embrace her spirituality, because this is the part that's going to continue on. This is the part of you that you can hold on to, maybe not in a materialistic, but something that's going to continue on. And for her, it's just a big black abyss. And it's just this impending doom that she knows is coming, doesn't know when. She's 70 years old, so it's coming soon. Where I feel like if you have some sense of the sense of soul or self for continuation, you at least have some piece of like, well, we'll see what happens next. But
Yeah.
for her, it's just a brick wall that she's just so afraid of running into.
That's such a powerful point that I never thought of before. But you give me so much encouragement knowing that raising my son, I'm not raising him to be anti anything, but not indoctrinating him with these concepts that I was indoctrinating him with
Hmm.
leaves him so much more open to explore. Like the way that you've described your own spirituality, which we definitely want to hear about, is just this openness, right? And this
Yeah.
like unity and love. And it's so hard to get there through the dogma. And so I love that about this part of your story. So
Yeah.
can you tell us more about like what that daily practice looks like for you and how your spirituality has evolved over time?
Yeah, absolutely. The excuse me. The daily practice is something I picked up as after what we were talking about earlier in one of my earlier bands disintegrated literally on stage. We were all doing way too many drugs, drinking way too much, and my drummer collapsed in the middle of a set that was supposed to be our like coming. We worked so hard to get to this point, and it just imploded, absolutely imploded in the most horrible way. And through that process and mourning, I quit doing cocaine, quit doing pretty much anything synthetic, and then found Kundalini yoga, which is a real breath centric yoga. And a big part of it is the sadhana, your morning practice, your morning ritual. In the true practice, you wake up at 3 a.m. You do it for about 2 hours, because that's when the energetic poles of the earth, as the sun moves across, and magnetic energy is at its strongest. I do not wake up at 3 a.m. every day to do that, but I wake up and I do my yoga and breathing exercises for about 20-25 minutes, sometimes up to 40 minutes if I include some other things in there. And it's just a way to reset the nervous system for the day, consider where you're going for the day. I was a high school teacher for some years, and it was the point where I had to mentally prepare myself. I worked at a really challenging high school in Orville, which is a particularly hard hit community. We've had fire after fire that impacts it. The median income is about 35,000 a year per household, so it's a really impacted it. And I really had to prepare myself every day to go into the classroom and interact with my 150 high school students who were coming in with this world of experience, and so I kind of fermented that practice in that. And that evolution of my spirituality, I feel like once I started doing Kundalini yoga, um, it was opening that door, and I could see the potential, and really began to connect with my higher self. And but I feel like that really started, as we talked about, like my childhood was kind of if not anti-Christian or Catholic. But when I was 17, no, 18, I did track and field, and we were in Las Vegas for the state track meet. And afterwards, some friends and I went to go see a movie. And when we came out later on the street, we're walking by and there was a drive-by shooting targeted at us. And the person in front of us was shot. The person behind us was shot. We had blood on our shirts. It was just an absolute mayhem. But there was a moment when I was taking cover behind a wall and I locked eyes with this young black woman, probably just 21, if that. And we just locked eyes, two total strangers in this like moment of pure fear. And we both just kind of looked at each other and there was this moment of like protection around us. I felt it was probably only a couple seconds, but it felt like a really long time. And I remember, and then we get back to our car. There's a whole other slew of stories that happened between there and our car. And eventually we got back and we're driving out and I was leaving Las Vegas right as the sun was rising. And I just had this feeling of like I was protected, which was hard to share with my other friends who were adamantly atheist. They're like, well, you're just lucky. And I was like, no, somehow our 8 friends were protected. The person in front of our friends got shot. The person behind us got shot. We had some sort of protection over us. And that's when I really started to think about that. And ironically, it was also the start of my drug and alcohol use. Because it was as an 18-year-old, one, that's when you really start doing it. But you don't realize the impact it has on you. And so you just try and numb that experience a bit. The school, there was no counseling from the school. It was like just the last month of my senior year, we were just like, I'm done. I'm out of here. So, it wasn't until now a lifetime later that I've really started to dig deep into it and finally, decided to stop drinking. But that moment of the catalyst was just kind of like, I touched it. I felt it, something beyond, and it wasn't, maybe angel, maybe, guardian, whatever it might be. But that's where I really glimpsed it. And then, through college, I took a lot of philosophy classes, and that's when I really began diving into Zen and Taoism, and that just really resonated with me. Just a lot of reading, a lot of lectures, listening to lectures and things like that. And like I said, kind of looking at Christianity and all these, I look at them as all paths to the same source. And so I like, just hearing what everybody's approach is to connecting with in Taoism, the Tao, or our Chi, or the Holy Trinity, or Allah, whatever you might call it. I think we just split hairs over naming the same thing.
I love that. I got so emotional when you talked about locking eyes with that woman and just that moment because it's that like humanity,
So human.
soul, that cellular, right? Like powerful connection that I just think is so beautiful and it transcends like demographics and time and,
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. It was, yeah. And it was something I really kept to myself for a long time. My friends, like I said, they just didn't really, we haven't really discussed it a whole lot here and there, but I think now that I'm a little bit more older and have actually dealt with it, I think I could probably have more conversations about it with them. But yeah, very human. And that was, and of course, I grew up in a really small town. My high school was, 99%, well, I'd say about 60, 70% white, 30% Hispanic. And then we had, a few African Americans in our school, and it really just like popped that bubble of protection that you have around yourself at that age. And what really stuck with me was as we're all kind of freaking out there, seeing a guy bleeding and all this, and just like wondering, and you just hear that we just heard this guy go, "Oh, I bet you that's the first time those kids seen somebody get shot." And we're like, "Oh, wow, this is kind of a daily thing for a lot of people in this world." And that perspective has always stuck with me of the things that people have to deal with on the daily basis and how they go about surviving it. And, you know, in my travels, I lived in Central America for a year, and I remember just like thinking about everybody's daily perspective, you know, and how much that informs how we see the world,
Yeah,
and how we interpret the world, and how we interpret everything around us. And I think, you know, our spirituality is a big part of that too, of what we have to deal with on the daily basis.
absolutely. So powerful. And you talked in your questionnaire thing about nature and your connection with nature. What does that look like? How does that manifest itself in your life right now?
Um, I was incredibly grateful to grow up in the North Shore of Lake Tahoe, next to literally the crown jewel of the Sierras. And I got to see also the huge development that had took place in the 1990s in Lake Tahoe. It went from a real small, really tight knit community, to where everybody got bought out by the end of the 90s, and to where, you know, it was a working class neighborhood, to where now it's, you know, they're all multi-million dollar houses on my neighborhood, but my parents still own the same house they bought, little A-frame they bought in, you know, 1981.
Oh my God.
And so seeing that kind of impact on nature, but also just that was my playground. I lived right in the woods, so it was just like going out there all the time, fishing, riding my bike, whatever it might be. And as I got older, um, you know, really, and particularly Taoism and Zen, the you know, looking at nature as our teacher, and and for me, that is still very much a part of my life. I'm an avid fly fisherman, so one of my favorite things to do is go off and find a beautiful spot, and really try and connect with the literally with the creatures in the stream, and keep my understanding um, of ecology and our impact, and also realizing that we're, you know, coming back to the human thing, is that every human needs clean water, good food, and clean air. It's like, to me, it's one of the most unifying factions of the human experience is our reliance on nature. And so for me, you know, I notice, like this summer, I've been very in here a lot,
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
the Gold Artist Academy and building my music business. And so I've been inside a lot this summer, and I every once in a while I just get I'm just like, I need to get out and really uh you know, ground and spend time. And this is where a lot of my plant medicines come in, is that I like to use psychedelics, particularly out in nature. That's where I first took them when I was 19, and I just had this, and that's a big point of my spiritual evolution, is that my first time taking LSD when I was 19, I was camping, and I just, you know, I had my preconceptions of what it would be, but really all I did was talk with nature for 5 hours. You know, I just, I
Wow.
had this wonderful connection of like, oh, I am actually seeing the world around me now, and it's you know, it wasn't a hallucinating experience. It was just very grounding, and like I see what's around me, and just felt really connected, and understood that the cells in my body are made from the water that flows through the streams. And I've had some other experiences sitting under trees in a, it sounds kind of macabre, but we took mushrooms and went to a cemetery, a really old one, and I was sitting under this giant oak tree and just had this moment of like, wow, this oak is made of the people in this in the cemetery,
Yeah.
and see the transition of energy from one form into another, and found myself
Wow.
right in between the two realms. And just that understanding, and almost the humility and the freedom of giving up to, I am a part of nature, and nature is random, and it just does what it does, and giving myself up to being a part of nature instead of separate then,
Yeah.
has been a big part, because nature just does what it does. And, you know, for me, I just do what I do. I can't explain it. You know, when you plant a seed, it does what it does. And just like all
Mm.
humans, we do what we do, but sometimes we try and make it seem like I'm not supposed to do that thing that I naturally want to do, because the
Yep.
dogma says this, the social constraints say this, but really it's just about, that connection to nature is just letting yourself be, letting yourself, go to grow wherever it is you're meant to grow. And just like a tree, it's impacted by its environment. A dry year or a wet winter is going to affect how we grow, but we're still just going to do what we do. And so that, and especially once you learn about the vastness of the universe, and all of that is part of nature too. It's not separate. We are stardust, and we are made from the particles, transmitted billions of light years across this universe. We are made of that same stuff. It's hard, the illusion that we are separate has been a huge part of, I think the Christian doctrine is meant to separate us from that, so that we feel dependent on and have to look to guidance of the wise ones instead. But when you commune with nature, you get a direct line to source right there.
I love that so much, right? That the dogma is that you're connecting to your power when really you're stripping yourself away from your power source in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I love that. It feels to me like such a yummy time to check out your music.
Yeah. Yeah, this would be,
Please,
I think
yeah,
this would
tell
be
us
a great
about
time.
it. Yeah.
Um, so, kind of explain a little bit about my music. Like I said, one of my last band that I put a lot into and kind of hung a lot of my expectations of success on, collapsed in massive fashion. And it wasn't the first one. It was probably about the third one that I had put a lot of energy into, and it just didn't work out for various reasons, mostly because of drugs and alcohol use. When you're in your early 20s, that's what you do, rock and roll, Um, and so after that one, I couldn't bring myself to be in another band. It took me 2 years to even pick up my instrument again. Um, but when I did, I have trust issues now because of it. And so I was like, all right, how can I make music by myself? And I started looping, and then over the past couple of years started evolving that into where now I work with Ableton, and I produce tracks, and I do live looping and sample live, and put them all together. But I really am inspired by artists like the Polish Ambassador and Porongi and East Forest, Liquid Bloom. A lot of these kind of, what's that? Like explorative artists, sound design, and really taking us on a trip just through sound. Very little vocals, even though the one I'm going to do now is actually a lot more vocal centric. And this song is called Reincarnation Blues, which was inspired by a book of the same title that I listened to while I was traveling around the UK this summer. And it's a fantastic book. The author's name is escaping me right now, but Reincarnation Blues. And that's, to me, a big part of my spirituality is actually, and what I've come to understand is the cycles, that this is not my first lifetime. This is not, and prepping for that next lifetime, and hopefully taking the lessons and progress I've made in this one and taking some of that into the next one. So that's what this song was inspired by and is kind of about. And before we get into, a big part of my philosophy with music is groove. Groove is the kind of inexplicable merger between all the different parts of music and what makes something make you want to get up and move. And that's a big part for me, is getting up and moving, and making people dance. And so all my music has that little undercurrent of groove, because I think movement is so important for the human.
I love that.
All right. All right. Again, this one called Reincarnation Blues. 10,000 lives is not as long as it seems when you live forever. Fall in love with death once more when it is reborn. Try and remember why we live and why we die. Over and 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 over. To become aware of our life feels like I've been here before. Now I realize why we live and why we die. So take my hand again and dance in this life and in this death. Over and 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 over, over and 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 over. Sugar. Sugar on. She gone. She gone. She gone.
Woo! Yes. Oh my goodness.
Right.
My neck literally hurts from from rocking it so much.
Oh,
I
that's great.
was loving that. The music
Great. Yeah.
the music feels like so yummy, I feel like I did a little LSD or something. I've never done it before, but I feel like I got a little taste of what that feels like. I
Yeah,
love
yeah, I mean, it's definitely an influencer in the music, and I bringing vocals in is actually kind of a newer addition for me. My
awesome.
three previous releases have all been instrumental, with the exception I brought in a singer for a couple songs, um, but I really try and emote more through the sound of the music, and the vocals are meant to just kind of like emphasize the idea. But I like to try and avoid being too lyrical, um, even though I feel like I'm a decent lyricist, because so much baggage is surrounded around language.
Mhm.
Perfect example, God. If I use that, is somebody going to be thinking about their personal experiences with that? Or,
Yeah.
oh, to hell, I'm going to write that person off. Or, whereas you can still emote that idea. I grew up playing symphonic music, and how much imagery I had on my head when I played these songs. And, you can, like William Tell Overture makes you think of a horse race, or, you know, any number of classical music. You know what the song's about, even though there's no lyrics to it. So I really try and get the emotion of the song down, and just kind of try and pepper in lyrics, more to just emphasize an idea.
Well, as you were singing, so many, I mean, it was just like a whole, I don't know, soup of like emotions, and my eyes were closed most of the time. I love that over and over, and I love that. And I could hear the harmonies. And then when you did the next layer, I was like, yes. And then when you were just doing the vocalizing part, whatever, I was like, oh, I can hear the harmonics to that. I can
Right.
hear like the layers, and I don't know what you're planning to do with the song, but it like you could feel it through
Yeah.
the music. And and then I had my eyes closed most of the time, but then you picked up the bass, and I was just like, wait, what? We're doing multiple instruments and looping that? Like, that was
Yeah.
such a fun treat. Thank you. Thank you
Oh,
for sharing your.
thank you. Yeah, I'm appreciative for the opportunity to perform always, and to discuss the meanings behind it, because so not very often we get that opportunity as musicians, with an attentive audience, and so really really fun to share. And um, boy, there's something in my mind there that you when you're talking. Um, but yeah, I really enjoy the bringing in different instruments and getting those going, and using that, because I play in a samba band as well, bateria, like a Brazilian samba,
Oh,
um, we're not a samba band, but we use those instruments and interpret new rhythms, and in that way it's all like hand signals. So we can groove for however we long we want on something, and I love having that freedom because
Oh,
working with Ableton and this, I can kind of just I can go back and forth and back and forth and weave here, weave there, and then improvise. If an idea pops in my head, I can take that idea and run with it. And I really love that freedom of improvisation and kind of being in the moment there.
that's awesome. Do you know Tash Sultana?
Yes, yeah,
You
definitely.
reminded me of her a bit today, which I am obsessed with Tash Sultana.
Well, that's a great compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. So, first of all, Cameron, as like a white dude, white male, straight male, you just give so much color to what that means in your music and in your world, just your worldview, your culture perspective. I just think it's so cool to see that. And I know we talked about this for a bit earlier, but I just
Yeah.
would love for you to share just what your spirituality means to you in the divine masculine as a man, as a straight man who is recently celebrating 11 years of marriage. Congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, I would love just to hear your take on what that looks like.
Yeah. Boy, growing up in that world, straight white dude, um, I, I, again, it kind of that growing up, it's your world. You don't even really recognize it. I think I was lucky enough. I love my dad. I wouldn't necessarily say he's the person with the most depth of knowledge or personality, or he's broad. He does a lot, but he's pretty shallow. And so I was lucky enough to have some really great other role models in my life, family, friends. My best friend's dad growing up was a really great, solid guy who taught me, respect and manners and how to open the door for women and just and not necessarily women, anybody. If you have I'm at the door and I'll open it. And so I felt lucky in that realm. But I think when I really came face to face with that culture of not even knowing it, I called it my member's jacket that I didn't even know I had on when I lived in Costa Rica for a year, because Costa Rica is a huge spot for sex tourism. And so when I'd be traveling around, I'm there to go to the jungle, swim in the ocean, see birds. Whereas most of the single guys my age or a little bit, if they're down there by themselves, they're down there to find women and cocaine. And they just assumed I was on that same train. So they would see me and immediately just divulge what they've been doing down there. And I was like, what the fuck are you telling me this for?
Wow.
Like, if I did any of that, that is stuff I would put deep away and would probably manifest itself in a disease, which I assume it probably does for a lot of those guys. But I was like, why do these guys keep talking to me about this? And I'm like, oh, it's because they're uncomfortable. They're in another culture that they're just here for that one thing. And they see this dude there that they can talk to, and they just, they want to talk to about that. And so that's like, and I was 20, 21 when that happened. And it really stuck with me as like, oh wow, this is a lot of that, a lot of white males' perspectives, and of course, I'm sure a lot of that comes from the indoctrination of being, I bet you their fathers were probably of the same mindset, particularly, or at the very least, the people they surround themselves with. And it just, that never even entered my thought. But as I got older and started kind of exploring that idea, I think my relationship with my sisters helped a lot. I spent a lot of time with my sisters, particularly my middle sister. She was in the Peace Corps while I was in um,
Wow.
Costa Rica. So I went and visited her for 6 weeks in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. And, I always wanted to put myself in uncomfortable situations just personally of like how do I interact and we were not on the tourist side of the island, we were on the local side of the island and really getting to know the community of her town that she was working in. She was a track and cross country runner, so she started a running club, and was really doing the best she could to try and get the community engaged into other activities that would um, eh, kind of want to be self, good for you running and all that, but also just trying to weave together. But then again, that comes with its own imposition of how we think community and all that should go. So it was an interesting time to be there and observe that and just talk and connect with people. And what I really enjoyed was connecting with people who we should have absolutely nothing in common. Um, if you look at it on a superficial level, but then once you get down into the more human level, we have everything in common,
Right,
and
right.
so I think a lot of those experiences uh, have kept me humble and have forced me to consider my perspective whenever I look at a situation, and as well too being a high school teacher. I think
Mm.
really you know being open not only to the students of, and I taught U.S. history too, so I'm teaching about slavery,
Yeah.
the Indian Wars, the gay rights, all these things, um, while also trying to address the rather conservative aspect that lived in at my school, and trying to not create a divide of this that just consider perspectives. Okay, this is what this person says, this is what this person says, this is what this is. Anybody 100% correct? Maybe, but we don't know that, so we have to kind of and never really just like trying to nail down an identity or a nail down this, and really that acceptance, again coming back to the idea of nature, of change. Everything changes, everything moves, and I think that's a big part of why a lot of people kind of just stop, is they just find that comfort zone and the security and that rut, and they just go, I'm comfortable here and I'm not moving. Um, I think my folks are kind of a good example of that. They're great, but they have their perspective. They're born 1950, 1953, so they have that perspective, and just and they stuck with it. And I think that's something I've always tried to not do, is stick with a single perspective. Um,
Mm.
and acknowledge and honor how I feel about it, but understand it. What the department head had a great saying, like, you don't have to believe everything you think, and and not everything you think is truth. And so keeping that in mind of like, okay, I feel this, and hopefully having enough awareness to go, okay, well, why do I feel this? And is that a truth, or is that just what I'm feeling? And that's a hard thing to separate. And so kind of coming back around to the, straight white male, um, it is a place of comfort, I think, for a lot of them, a lot of men, um, and I'd say particularly, I, I, I hope that many of my cohorts of my generation are less in that realm. But having been raised by baby boomers and spending a lot of time, and I really enjoy and cherish a lot of the relationships I have with some of my dad's friends. Uh, but some of the conversations I have to be like, uh, let's maybe look at it from this angle without necessarily attacking them. Because anytime you attack anybody for who they are, they're gonna put up a wall, and you're done. So if
Right.
you start to examine, oh, that's an interesting thing you said. Why? Where? Explain. And the Socratic method is making people explain where they come from, um, And a lot of times, if you make somebody explain it, they will expose themselves as being like, oh, I guess I do have a big gap in my understanding here. Um, and so questioning goes a long ways. And so kind of to wrap the whole thing up, I question myself a lot through my own experiences and time away. And my wife and everybody will say I'm a deep thinker, and sometimes it gets the best of me. Where I just I get in that, I start thinking and I get in a mood. But I feel like that's kind of a prerequisite for growth, is you have to have that time of introspective and really think about it. You really just have to think about it and wonder and consider and analyze and then sometimes just feel.
I love that so much. And in all of that, what would you say is the divine, like your definition of divine masculinity? What does that look like for you?
Um I've looked at this a bunch because the idea of yin and yang is very important to me. I don't know if my tattoos are coming out on there,
Oh, there you
but
go. Very
um,
cool.
and particularly through a lot of my plant medicines, experiences, is understanding, and of course Taoism, Zen, the yin yang, and that everything has something of its opposite. Nothing exists without its opposite. If it was all white, it would be so bright we wouldn't be able to see. If it was all dark, it would be so dark we couldn't see. So we need the contrast. We need that opposite. And I think that's where my relationship. I feel like I've had really good, healthy relationships, romantic relationships, and I think particularly with the relationship with my wife, we are the yin to the yang with each other. Personality, she's type A, I am not. I'm type B. She is very financial, detail oriented. I'm more artistic and loose, and we really balance each other out. And I think the the divine masculine is you know honoring the best parts of masculinity. Like, you know I this is a somewhat conjecture, but the males being somewhat bigger and kind of somewhat aggressive are there as a protectorate. We're there to protect, but sometimes when that gets distorted and messed with, then it turns into aggression, just raw aggression. And so I embrace that aspect of to keep people physically protected, and but also that needs to extend to emotionally protected, and spiritually protected. And I think that so often it's an incomplete, and that's the term toxic masculinity. I think that it's just an incomplete understanding of it, that and I think a lot of that comes from our culture over the past 100 years. And being a history teacher, I really think a lot about where we are now and how we got there, and the impacts of all that. And we look at the past 100 years. We've had 2 world wars, numerous other guerrilla and satellite wars all around, and particularly like World War II. How many men came back from that and were just told to zip it and get back to it? And that is a huge impact in my life, because my grandfather was a World War II vet, and he came back and he molested my aunts. And because of this suppressed trauma that will leak out somehow, because they were told to be that way. They did their job. They went out and they protected the world. But when they came back, because they had that incomplete identity of what masculinity is, and sharing, like, holy shit, that was one of the, trying to get rid of it, society and everybody said, nope, lock it up, you're a male. And it's just an incomplete process.
Wow.
And I think that it's embracing that. Yes, it is my job to protect and to be that, but it's also my job to feel and to cry, which crying is the best way to get rid of unnecessary emotions. I mean, it is a fast track. And that was something that was really hard for me when I was teaching, is I had to put such a shell around myself emotionally, because otherwise you can't function. Like, you really have to set yourself numb, because there's so much secondary trauma from these kids that you have to put that. And there was like a 2-year period where I didn't shed a tear. And my mom was in the hospital for alcoholism. There was this where it's like things that you normally would have just made me break down. It took me like a 6 months or so after being done teaching to finally release that. And it was so nice to finally do it. But it was multiple deep, like almost like 20-minute cries to get that out. And I think that's what my experience with ayahuasca has really shown me, is how much I held in, from things like when I was a kid, seeing that drive-by shooting, to the family stuff, and just like, and what the ayahuasca comes in and it gets it out. It gets it out through tears. It gets it out through other purges. And then when you feel the lightness after that, when those sort of emotions come in, you're like, oh wow, I see you, and you're going out, because you don't serve me anymore. If you're not here to serve my higher purpose, then get the fuck out.
Love it. Yes. So many amazing nuggets there for people, for men, for even women, straight women, watching what it looks like to do the work to heal and to stand in that divine masculinity. I just I just really appreciate who you are in the world, Cameron. Like, really,
Thank
I
you.
do. And I appreciate all the wisdom that you've shared with us today, and your music and all of that. So if someone is watching, we do have a friend hanging out with us,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
wait, hello. Where can people find you and connect with you more? Where would we like to send them?
Yes. The easiest place, of course, of all the social media, what have you. Uh, my main ones are Instagram and Facebook. Obviously, Facebook, because we're, the Gold Artist Academy is really focused in on that. I do have my website, modernmethodsmusic.com. But the best way has been, through the private fan group that I created through my Gold Artist Academy. Um, if you find me on Facebook or Instagram, and want to be a part of this group, it's a place where I do bi-monthly live streams, share, and I'm just about to go into the studio to record like this new track here. Well, in the studio, I'm in it right now, but I'm going to be sharing kind of a video journal of that process of recording, because I do most of it myself. So it's kind of nice to be able to share and bring people in. I do miss that collaborative effort. So Modern Methods Music, either at Facebook, Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. But if you go to the Facebook or Instagram, send me a message. Just say, hey, this really connected with me. I'll send you an invite to the fan group, because it's really cool, and it's had a lot of um, uh, positive impact on the people who are joining and resonating with the music. And I have noticed that a lot of the folks joining are going through stuff right now, and it's been great to kind of connect with somewhat strangers on a real deep level, like really quick. And I think that's something that I'm really grateful that people feel safe to share that so quickly on. And so yeah, and that's been growing. I'm gonna really invest a lot of my time there, because it's great to connect one-on-one with people there.
Yeah, that program's so powerful. And how
Yeah.
long have you been in it now?
I have my graduation next week, so I am just about done.
Wow,
Uh,
yeah. I
yeah, so that
graduated
was
like 2 months ago, and I graduated a little late. So I
yeah.
joined in March, and
Okay.
it's so, yeah, it's so powerful to see what's possible with music. And
Yeah.
I love that you're doing it.
Yeah, their philosophy was right in line with My philosophy of visualizing what you want, and then putting the pieces together to make it happen. And they really help show what a lot of those pieces are. And especially where I'm at musically, really feel like I've honed in on where my sound and my vision, and so from here it's just continuing to build on that.
I love it so much. And as this community grows, I'd love to invite you back at some point, share your
I would
music, share
love
the
to be back.
evolution.
Yeah.
Share, we're always evolving, the spiritual evolution and all of it. But thank you, thank you, thank you for hanging out with us today. Before we close, what's one final thought you'd like to leave folks with?
Oh boy, one final thought. I guess that I feel like something I come back to time and time again, and this comes back to the nature philosophy again, is that no matter where you're at, if you're in your trough of the low, um, that it will come around. It will come around, and also to keep in mind too, when you're at that peak, that it's okay when that peak starts to descend and you find you continue that cycle, as I said, over and over and over and over and over, just like the sun, the moon, the seasons, the
Mm,
rotation around the planet or the sun around our galaxy, the galaxy around the universe. It's all cycles. And so embracing that, the peaks, enjoy the peaks, and embrace the lows, because
mm.
I will say the best growth I've ever had is from my lowest of lows, and my music and where I am now would not be without that lowest of low. And so embrace the cycle.
Love that. Powerful message to leave us with. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
everything that you are, everything that you shared. And we can't wait to see how it all evolves.
Yeah, yeah. I got like I said, in the studio here. So look for some new music this spring, and I got another release on Spotify. Just an EP I just released, and old music as well. So I got a bit of a catalog to for you to dive into if you're digging my vibe.
Love it. I'm going to dive in because I
Yeah.
love the song that you shared. And we'll also link your Spotify. Just send me what you want me to link, and we'll
Okay.
link it for the safe space as well.
Yeah.
And we'll bug you soon to come share an update
Great.
with us at
Well,
some point.
Sashiko, thank you so much. This is really fun. It's always great to share and connect with people. So, best of luck with your music in this new project. And to anybody who saw me, I hope to connect with you.
Thank you so much. All right, pals. You know
All
where
right.
to connect with us more for next time, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.